Hello, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you again on a very cold day, yet again. It is snowing outside and you may hear the fire crackling in the background. Our theme today is color, and some of the colors might bring warmth to you as well. Color is an extremely important aspect, compositional aspect in a painting. Some artists focus primarily on line. Some artists focus on color. Many of them have a variation between the two. It sometimes depends also on which period a painting has been done and which school of painting it is. And I would like to invite you to go on a journey with me, a little bit again on a chronological process, and to find out a little bit what are different approaches. You will find certain topics within the colors which are recurrent, but applied in a very, very different context, subject matter and style, and particularly also in the application of paint. So let us start here with our first example. It is from Fra Angelico, an early Renaissance artist from Florence, or the Florentine region, and it's an Annunciation. I don't know if you had a chance to see this work in flesh. I have been so lucky to visit Florence and to go to the convent of San Marco. And you have to imagine, it is a convent where the monks really retire, and they have very small cells. In each of the cells is just one fresco painting, and otherwise it is extremely bare. So it is a moment of retreating from the outside into an inner sphere and to contemplate on different, for example, also stages of the Passion of Christ. This painting, however, you encounter when you walk up the stairs and before you join corridors from which the different cells spread out. So in comparison to the other frescoes, it is fairly large in comparison, like I said. Another aspect which is very, very important, which not many people realize nowadays when you visit a convent and you have the opportunity to see that fresco painting, the window, imagine like on that side, further up is a window which is at the moment covered in order not to damage the fresco paint. But in the context of the time, you would have daylight shining through the window, and it would be almost a double symbolic meaning. So that you have as a topic the Annunciation, Gabriel announcing to the Virgin Mary that she will have the Christ child. But more or less, together with the Annunciation, you would have the light, the daylight shining almost as a divine light onto the Virgin Mary. So it is something a little bit out of our topic now with color, but I just thought it would be really a shame not introducing you to that aspect. Now, when it comes to color, there are different things you can start questioning. So for example, is there a wide range of colors? So you might say, well, there is a range of colors, but it's not usually wide. What you might already identify is that the architectural elements, together with the fence in the background, they are fairly monochromatic, very simplified. While the others, like the clothing of the Virgin Mary, of Gabriel, of the angel, and then also of the background, you have many more colors. Then, are the colors naturalistic? You would argue yes, because you feel like there are skin tones, you can identify maybe with the color of the clothing. The color would be absolutely accurate in view of maybe the fences, the wooden fences, of the flowers, of the trees and the plants in the background, and also maybe of the stoneware and again the architectural features. So naturalistic colors. Then you have, for instance, here quite a wide range of colors here. You have also complementary colors. So for example, you have blues and oranges here as a contrast. It almost feels, I really say, feels like prismatic colors, like the colors of the rainbow. Not necessarily in the order you would find it in the rainbow, but you have quite a nice range of colors. Here, for example, it is the same color, but you have different tints, highlights. In other areas, here, for example, you have more, again, of the same color, but it gets darker and darker, so different shading. Another thing is, you have, for instance, that the colors which appear here in the meadow are almost reiterated here in the angel's wings. So what I wanted to say is that color is really used as a very conscious and distinctive compositional feature. It is almost interesting as well that the heavenly messenger, in all its glory, the colors are so much richer and varied as to enhance the preciousness, the value, the importance of this heavenly messenger. But do not underestimate other things. The Virgin Mary, in comparison, the colors are very simplified. So you have the white and this blue. So in comparison to the angel, much more restricted. But this blue, and you will see it in subsequent paintings we are going to look at, is made out of a very precious stone called lapis lazuli, which you find in modern-day Afghanistan. It is still nowadays, and it was definitely at that time, the most expensive color. And because it was the most expensive color, so the person or the organization or the institution or the church which commissioned a painting would normally allocate a certain amount of lapis lazuli to be used within a painting because it was so expensive. Now, apart from the preciousness of the stone itself, you need to consider also 15th century Florence, the long journey it would have taken to get from modern-day Afghanistan through the Silk Road, and then maybe to Venice, and then from Venice to Florence, the pigments to be ground. Consequently, the blue is often used for the most important person. So just because this is much more wealthy or appears richer, does not mean necessarily it is. So this is elegant, refined, restrained, but in some ways it enhances already the divinity in much more. Then we associate with the color blue, and this is again something, when you look at colors, are the symbolic colors. So we have the color blue as a queen of heaven, which she becomes later on. And the white enhances her virginity, her purity. If the architectural framework here would be much more decorated, we would not focus as much on the figures. So this contrast is also interesting. Good. If you are moving now to the next example, please. So this is a century later, Titian's Bacchus and Ariadne. It's nowadays in the National Gallery, but it was a private commission for the Duke of Ferrara, and it was one of a series of paintings for his palazzo. When you look now at this here, probably one of the first things you are going to notice, the amount of the lapis lazuli blue within the painting. Look at the size of the painting. So within itself, at that time, when people would have come and visited the palace and would have been guests there, the first thing, apart from the narrative unfolding, they would have been stunned by the wealth communicated through the painting just because of the color blue. As you may see also, it is used here for one of the protagonists. I know that so far I have not really told you any contextual background, but I think it is in that context maybe more important to highlight certain things. So what is happening? Ariadne, the princess, helps Theseus to escape the labyrinth. And they lived happily on an island called Naxos. But Theseus felt like he needed to go on new adventures, and he decided to abandon Ariadne on the island. So we have here Ariadne, and what you might see only very faint in the distance here is a ship sailing away. So she, in this movement, she's really sad for Theseus' departure. She's mourning his departure. She wishes, please do not go. And at that moment, in this kind of twist, she's stopped by a really loud noise coming out of this forest. And who is coming out of the forest? So you have Bacchus here with the Bacchante. So with his attendants. We are going to revisit this painting on another time. There's so much symbolism in there and so many complex figures, and it's a wonderful painting. We could spend hours on it. But I just wanted to explain to you in the context how the paint and the color is used. So they are spilling out of the paint, out of the forest, and here is Bacchus seeing Ariadne here, jumping out, and in this kind of jump, they look at each other. And in this kind of moment, they fall in love. So it's love at first sight. One of the reasons why I'm saying this to you now is also, so Ariadne, she's really a protagonist. And hence, the much more luster of the lapis lazuli blue used here. And the way it is painted, it makes it also heavier. So it grounds her more. Bacchus, with this kind of red cape, so the red is also very vivid. It shows passion. It literally draws us into the painting as well. But it makes it also much more weightless. But do not forget, she's an earthly princess. He's a god. The weight and the weightlessness. Then you have the Bacchantes spilling out with the different characters out of the darkness. Now when you just think of Bacchus, the god of wine, of debauchery, of festivity, of getting drunk. So maybe a darker side of humankind, they come out of the darkness, and hence you have the different dark shades of greens and browns, earthy, dark, a little bit so mysterious, spilling out, and there's this pure princess in this much more lighter area. So it gives her almost a divine glow around that. We have here just a little spot of blue, but it helps us guiding our eyes from the left-hand side more to the other side of to the center of the picture plane. Part of the narrative in itself as well is, which I find very charming, is because there are two versions a little bit of that explanation. But because eventually they're going to marry, and because she is earthly and he's divine, one of the sayings is that because she carried a wreath or a crown, that Bacchus took it, threw it up into the air, and it became a constellation of stars, which is still nowadays called the corona. And in that sense, he is making her eternal. Because otherwise you may have wondered, what is this here? Another time I guide you through all the different figures and the symbolism of it. But the key thing is this diagonal which goes through the painting. And this more darker side, and then the light side, and the wells of the color. And now we understand also the patches of red which express the passion. And not only maybe things which we might relate to maybe wine and these aspects, but it's also the passion. Good, thank you. Now, this is a portrait. So far I don't think we have looked at portraits. Again, very interesting example, and you can see how much more prominent the blue has been used. Eleonora of Toledo was the wife of Cosimo de' Medici. And so this is a dynastic portrait, and it was extremely important for any family, but you can imagine for such important families as the Medicis, that you have a male heir, hence her son Giovanni, because then you have the feeling the dynasty is going to continue. I hope that we can spend another time together to look at different types of portraiture throughout the ages and compare from single portrait to group portrait or different double portraits. But anyway, so we have here Eleonora of Toledo with her son Giovanni. It has been a private commission, but it has a very public function because you want to show wealth and the dynastic continuation in a very, very subtle way, which you may not notice at all. So you have this blue background. They are sitting in a kind of balcony. Here in the far distance, you have only a small stretch of the River Arno, which goes through Florence. And do not forget that the Medicis made their wealth through banking, but also through trade. And the trade would have often gone along the river. So being seated up, further up, on a balcony, almost overlooking the city or the river, shows the importance of the family, the domination of the family. But let us come back to here. This style is Mannerist. It's not yet so starkly pronounced, but one of the things which the Mannerist artists did, they used quite metallic colors. And you feel like there's something quite metallic in the luster of the way the painting is applied. And they use elongations to make figures looking more refined. So for example, often you may see figures with an elongated neck or with elongated fingers. Now you have Eleonora looking, so straight, both of them look out to us. She putting very carrying the hand around her son. Her son, interestingly, also wears a clothing with the with the lapis lazuli blue color. This dark, this kind of very rich brocade is an extremely expensive fabric, but it's not like crying, shouting out colors. So there's something quite restrained still about it. So this play between being simple, because there's nothing in the background which distracts us. Often sitters would have then a very large background just to show a little bit of their wealth and their importance or their intelligence. No, very, very simplified. But the thing is this really rich blue background, and you know by now how expensive the blue would have been, indicates the wealth just through the use of color. But it brings out the expensiveness of the brocade dress. Then another thing is, if you're looking, and this is also important with colors, is this kind of different shadings, the different kind of light and dark areas of the same color. So when you see here, the area around her face is much, much lighter. So it is almost like a halo. As if she, although it is a kind of contemporary, in the context of the time, contemporary portrait, double portrait, dynastic portrait, she plays with the connotation and with the symbolism of the Madonna and the Christ child in a very, very subtle way, but it wouldn't have been understood by the people at the time. So as you can see, it's just a few things, and we're not even talking about the jewelry, for instance, but just through these few things, with the colors, with the location, how wealth can be communicated. Another thing is that this blue is bringing, like I said, the people forward, and it makes it cool. Because the first thing you may have encountered is they are almost like sculpture or porcelain faces. There's no vividness, no animation. There's something almost aloof, cold, distant about them. And the blue around it enhances that. We have seen this painting beforehand, and this is why I like sometimes to come back to paintings which we have done, so that you can again revisit them and focus then on different aspects. So while we had in the previous painting the blue, which really made it cold, and the figures aloof, here we have a brown background. In a brown background, you have the different figures and different colors, but a brown background almost unifies the scene. I admit that in the previous painting it did it as well, but here there's something much warmer coming through. It brings out the scene in the foreground also much stronger, because we are not distracted by any bright colors in the background. You may also see how, even if it is not a wide range of colors, the colors are so distributed that we are looking unconsciously from foreground to background, from left to right, from people to the still life displayed. So let's just take the red, even if there are different shades of red. Here, 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 here. And one could argue maybe a little bit in the lit up arm here. The green as well is bouncing off from one side to the other, and you can pick up one color or the other. The white breaks the whole thing up a little bit, so that the earthen colors come out more strong as well. Again here, so you have not a wide range of colors. You have primary colors. You have, for instance, a very naturalistic way of the colors, because they are what you call representational. So you would not have maybe grapes which would be pink, or I do not know, in a kind of ultramarine blue, for example. No, they are. You can really identify them. And then there's the symbolic use of colors. The red for Christ's passion and for the blood of Christ. And again the white for his divinity, his purity, his innocence. So even in this very, very subtle way, the colors bring this forward. The more earthen colors bring out the kind of simplicity of the scene of the disciples. You know, for example, here, the drawn sleeve, it is a very simple inn. So the simplicity comes across just the way the color is applied. Think about the previous painting, you know, the wells of the colors. And also, even if the colors were muted in Eleonora of Toledo's dress, but they are much more pointed, so highlighted, carved out, while here it really creates an atmosphere of warmth, so that we can concentrate on this moment of recognition. Oh, this is Christ. Delacroix, Liberty Leading the People. So we have a romantic painting, a 19th century Paris, Very, very famous painting, extremely, extremely large scale. We have visited it beforehand. Again, you have a very small range of colors. So primarily you have some more beige, whites, browns, greys, with the exception of the red, white, blue, which are the colors of the tricolor, yeah. So the French flag. And if you pay a little bit more attention and you get closer to it, you will see that the color is reiterated. So for instance, you have it here, you have it here, you have it quite pronounced here, and you have it again here. So again, foreground, background, foreground, center, here. Takes us again across the picture. Here, the color is also used to create a distance and to create an atmosphere of this kind of smokiness, of mystery, of this broiling atmosphere. The kind of hues which are used here with the browns and the greys and the whites and the beiges and so on, they unify the whole crowd, pushing forward. So it's not that you have figures which are really distinctively in different colors. No, it's so much more uniform crowd. Very important here how the colors of the tricolor are reiterated. So it's a symbolic use of colors. And so this admiringly looking up towards her, it enhances the importance of the meaning of the tricolor. Yeah. You have here an atmospheric use of colors, creating distance and referring so a little bit in a kind of the smoke which surrounds the city in the background. For instance, the kind of the gestures of this boy is more or less parallel to her, and we have it also here in this much more maybe middle to upper class men. Again, it unifies, when you look at the colors, they're reiterated. So it unifies a symbolic figure with someone from the streets and young, and someone who is in the social ladder, maybe higher up, but it unifies them all. They all come here for the same purpose. So again, colors are really consciously used in that painting. Good. So this is now an Impressionist painting. Monet's Impression Sunrise actually gave the movement Impressionism the name. And here I would like to stop maybe for a moment and to tell you a few things which are important before we start looking in more detail at the painting. We have the Industrial Revolution, and through the Industrial Revolutions, new innovations were able to be developed. One of the things was a portable easel, which meant that artists suddenly were able to carry the easel and a smaller portable canvas with them somewhere to paint outside, what you call plein air painting. So that was a facility. It was a facility they had because of these inventions. Another key invention was that paint was being able to be transported in zinc tubes, which have been developed. Until then, when you wanted to transport oil paint, which you made up, it was often stored in pigs' bladders, but you can imagine how fragile that was in case it got a hole and suddenly all the paint went out or drying out. But the zinc tubes, it made it all more portable, which freed artists up to paint outside, and they really embraced it. Because until then, many artists did outdoor sketches, often also sketches with watercolor, but then went back into the studio and then started transferring the different sketches then on a much, much larger canvas. But here suddenly artists could paint outside, which made them interested in different subject matter. Because if they went outside to paint, let's say a sunrise, like here, and the sunrise is by the water, by the sea. So you have here the port of Le Havre in the distance, which is an industrial port, but also for fishermen. And you have the steam coming out, you have morning mists, the sun gradually, the rising sun is gradually burning up the mist and the clouds. So this can change, and we know this all from observing nature. These things can change very quickly or subtle, we do not know. So how can an artist capture this moment? So they have to sit there, they need to be able to observe it, and they need to capture these transient, ephemeral moments quickly. So generally speaking, canvases are much smaller. You may see here the size, it's a much smaller canvas. It's almost like maybe 2/3 smaller than any of the others which we have looked beforehand. So small canvases. Normally, many artists would have primed canvases. Here the paint is applied directly on the canvas, which sometimes brings out the colors stronger. And you may see then in subsequent examples that artists on purpose left certain areas without paint, so that you have the kind of texture of the canvas or the plain canvas coming through. So there was no preparatory drawing. It was what you call alla prima, so straight onto the canvas painting, capturing a transient moment, and in order to do that, they had to paint quickly and use very quick brush strokes. And this is how the Impressionist technique developed. There's also this kind of topic which they really like to embrace, modern life. For us, there's nothing here about modern life, but in the context of the time, it was an industrial port. So from that point of view, it would have been a contemporary scene embracing modernity. So what do we have here? One of the first things which you might see is the orange sun and the blue. So they are what you call complementary colors. There has been a French scientist called Chevreul, and he developed the theory of complementary colors, which artists at the time then really embraced and tried to apply, and the Impressionists did this with huge energy. And this is almost like a textbook application of using the complementary colors. The other thing is, Impressionists did not tend to use black, and definitely not blacks for using shadows. So they used colors, and in different kind of shades of colors to evoke the shadows. So it might not come across here, but this is more dark green and a lighter green. So it's what you call colors in shadow. Often Impressionists, and this is why I come back a little bit to the composition, used more a kind of some panoramic view, and which you come across then in other paintings which we might study, is that it's what you call a cropped composition. So it's almost as if you would take a photographic snapshot of a scene. So the key thing is here, through color, to create an atmosphere. There's no symbolic use, there's almost a sense of abstraction there, but what they want to capture is this feeling of the moment of a rising sun. Now here, color is used in a very expressive way. Van Gogh, interestingly enough, I mean, he would not have done it all plein air, but there's evidence that he was sitting in Provence and actually did a lot of studies and painted certain parts in nature. And I do not know if you have been able to visit Provence, but you may know also that there is the Mistral wind, which is a kind of maybe the French equivalent to what we have here, the Föhn. and it's a very warm wind, and it goes constantly, and it comes from all directions as well, and it has a very energetic feeling, mood. It depends maybe on your personal, on your personality, but there's something very so all-embracing. Anyway, so you have here the wheat field, and the way the paint is applied here is what you call, also in the clouds, as a technical term called impasto, when you apply paint very, very thickly. And he applied it in multi-directional brushwork. So in order that we have the feeling this Mistral wind really goes like this and like that and like that through the wheat field. And obviously the cypress trees and the olive trees and the bushes, they all move with this kind of wheeling and twirling Mistral wind. And this is also evoked here in the clouds. Here you have the Apenine Mountains, and then how important the sky is with the movements of clouds. So can you see the difference between capturing this ephemeral moment, so an instant transient moment of the Impressionists, and here it is much more about the expression, the feeling of the artist, what it means for him being here. In the previous painting, everything was built up through color. There was no line. The Expressionists started using line again, outlining. So you have these areas much, much stronger. Also the effect of the colors. You have the warmer colors here in the foreground. And in an expressionistic way, Van Gogh used emerald perspective to a certain extent to convey the sense of distance and this different layering. So you have the field in the foreground, you have the bushes and the trees here in the midground, the mountains in the background, and then almost this kind of 2/3, 1/3 sky. And the cypress trees cutting through all that is almost bringing the different foreground, midground, background together through the verticality. Now this is a Fauvist painting. So far, maybe with the exception of the Impressionist painting, color was always naturalistic and representational. Here, not at all. One can argue, yes, maybe here we have a little bit of so skin-like colors, but otherwise, I mean, like here, this pink here, and then here, this orange, and what is the yellow and what is the red here, so it's very, very difficult. So they are non-representational. They're almost used in an arbitrary way or just for compositional purposes. We still have the certain effects of the colors. So for example, like the yellow and the oranges, the warm colors, bring it forward, while the blues and the greens take us, the cooler colors are more recessive colors. Something which I pointed out in a previous painting with Van Gogh is the outline. You will see that Matisse here also used outline quite distinctively. Look at here, for example, apart from the figures. Then how is color here conveyed? So we have certain areas where you see that the color is modulated, so you feel like there's a little bit of three-dimensionality there. And then you have here areas where it's almost a complete flat application of paint, so there's no consistency as well. So it's all rather arbitrary. But what do the colors communicate? There is maybe something quite similar to what we had previously with Van Gogh. There's this essence of this warmth, this joy, the passion, the happiness. And that is much more important than anything else for the artist. And we are literally guided. I mean, some of the same colors appear again here in the distance and here in the foreground. We have this sense of orange or brownish color again appearing throughout the painting. But it's quite arbitrarily used. So again, it is about what do the colors, how do they make us feel? So it's not about in a really directly symbolic way or wanting to communicate maybe like with the ultramarine, the wells, or telling us such narrative. No, it's more about this atmospheric feeling, to capture this sense of happiness and to live in the moment. Very, very different. I was very tempted not to show you the title, but I think it's, on the other hand, quite nice for you to have really the title of a painting. So it's quite square-shaped, it's quite a distinctive size. And I wonder whether if you would not have read the title, and it might be just untitled, Mondrian untitled, you have the measurements and the time, whether you would be at all able to maybe interpret this kind of canvas. Now, the Broadway is in New York. The streets in New York and the way how Manhattan is organized is in a very grid-like area. The whole street network is a grid, a very logically one. You have the gridding here. Mid-1940s. Think about the artificial light pulsating. Advertisements, cars, lit buildings. You might see, cars moving up and down. So this kind of vibrancy, a rhythm, a kind of blinking comes across the way the color is distributed here. So it's a very, very, very kind of limited palette of colors. Again, we have primary colors of red, yellow and blue. There's a little bit of white and off-white or gray. But this kind of, and also there is no distinctive pattern the ways the colors are applied. So that you feel, despite the organizational structure, there's a sense of randomness, which maybe also the randomness, we do not know which cars appear on the streets or things like that. But this contrast of this clear organization and then this pulsating moments and this limited range, there's almost something audible coming through, as if you would hear in the distance. So like maybe sirens, people talking, maybe a horn beeping, maybe an advertisement flashing out bigger. So it invites us to contemplate on the modernity of everyday life in an abstracted form. And this is Francis Bacon. We have come across Francis Bacon beforehand. Maybe because of my time in England, I just thought, for me, Francis Bacon at that time was a very new artist to explore. And even though his paintings make me often terribly uncomfortable, there is so this attraction and repulsion at the same time, because his works always make me think. And I think this is based on our last Zoom meeting. What is art? Maybe it should make us thinking, even about things we might not like to think. So we have Study of a Portrait, Man in a Blue Box. Now the box is actually not so much blue, but you have this outline white. Very interestingly, that the majority, apart from here, that the majority of the paint is applied in vertical streaks, which almost echoes the open mouth. Then this kind of frame here, the white frame here, this angularity, the geometry, which you could say maybe could highlight or ennoble him, because it elevates him, singles this person out, could be also maybe imprisoning. And I think what makes us even more uncomfortable is because it's translucent, we can see through. And this kind of formality evoked through that frame is in this quite formal clothing also, of the suit and the tie. The color range is very limited. Again, so we have primarily earthen colors like the browns and the grey. Even his suit is in more like darker colors. We have highlights of white through the frame, here in the face, here by the hands. And if you might remember when I mentioned to you with the Impressionists, they often sometimes leave certain areas, so where the canvas is exposed. What Bacon did, that in some areas, for example like here, you can really see the texture of the canvas coming through. Then there's this threatening patch of blue. We have no idea what it is. A little bit of blue is reiterated here, but the blue is so outside of this frame. So it's something which makes us very, very, very kind of uneasy. It's very difficult to understand it. The other thing is, contrary to the preciseness of this block-like, unmodulated colors in the previous painting, we have smudges here. It's almost like if it's dirty, uncomfortable. You know, paint is not applied in a very kind of precise way. So this is a little bit like a journey through the use of oil on canvas primarily. And I would like to conclude with something of mixed media, I want to warn you, a very controversial painting come work of art. And if we are moving now to this one here, we started off with a religious painting of the Annunciation. Here we have by Chris Ofili, a British artist who has background from Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Holy Virgin Mary. It was done in the mid to late 1990s, and it caused a huge outcry within England. It was really vilified, and the exhibition or his work went together with a group of artists which was called the YBA's Young British Artists to New York, where actually there were demonstrations, and the mayor at that time, Rudolph Giuliani, did big speeches and wanted to close the exhibition. So it's an extremely controversial painting. I do not want to go now into the controversy. I want to focus on the colors, and in that sense, although you have oil paint, but how the artist also used other media. One of the things here, because otherwise you would not have been able to see that area so much, I would like that you are aware of something. The painting, as you can see on a really large scale, would normally stand against a wall, slightly so tilted, and would have resting on two elephant dungs. So he brings in more or less fertility symbols, which in the context of where the artist comes from would be very regarded as actually as a compliment, as a celebration of fertility. So if you take things out of a context, you can be really offended. And what he did this kind of mixed media thing. So on the one hand, when you just look at this golden background, it's something you would find in the international Gothic style and in early Renaissance paintings, and particularly also in Eastern European art with the icons. So he used this Renaissance idea of a golden background. Then he uses the lapis lazuli blue. So he's really highlighting the Virgin Mary as the Queen of Heaven. her fertility, apart from the elephant dung at the base, here's another elephant dung, which would be then her right breast. Now, we are offended, but you may have come across quite a lot of altar paintings by renowned Italian artists of the Renaissance, where you have the Virgin Mary feeding the Christ child, and we are not offended. So I just want to, I'm not, how shall I say, excusing the artist, but I just want to say how he challenged conventions. Then another thing is because of these areas here, he cut out of sometimes pornographic magazines or of magazines female genitalia or breasts, and he cut them out, and he used then things like polyester resin to glue the things on. So he used the artificiality, but the way he put all these items around it, it looks like if it would be cherubs flying around, heavenly messengers, so angels. So again, he's challenging, so this Western conception of art, bringing his own background in. So I know it is quite a big journey from our from our first painting. But I thought it might give us quite an interesting journey through it. Thank you very much.